Welcome to the Inside Silverstone podcast, a business-focused podcast covering all things tech, engineering and innovation. Hosted by me, Chris Broome, a huge tech, motorsport and gaming fan, and also the owner of Longhurst, a firm of lifestyle financial planners and independent financial advisors located in Silverstone, Northamptonshire. This is a series of unscripted and unpolished conversations with leading business owners, thought leaders and high-tech talent where we discuss their experiences within the Silverstone business and motorsport region. We will also be asking them to share their knowledge, insight and their thoughts on the future just for you. If you're looking to learn more about the Silverstone high growth region and commercially connect with like-minded peers, you've definitely come to the right place. Welcome to Inside Silverstone. Welcome to the next edition of Inside Silverstone. My name is Chris Broome and I am your host. Today I am delighted to finally welcome to the show Matthew Haskins, who is Managing Director of Lotus Silverstone Limited. Matthew, welcome to the show.
Good morning, Chris.
Matt, as is customary, and with your permission, sir, I'd love to quickly run through a quick career background, just so that our wonderful dear listeners can understand the sort of genesis of your journey to eventually becoming Managing Director of Lotus for Silverstone. Is it okay if I do that?
Yeah, of course.
Cool. Okay, so I grabbed this off LinkedIn, as I customarily do. So your career actually started with Arcadia Group, and namely Burton Menswear. And so before you got into cars, you're starting in sort of fashion and retail, and then you progressed to Land Rover for Hartwell, and then progressed to Audi in Swindon, and then moved again several years later to Dick Lovett, who are based in Swindon by all accounts.
Yeah, that's right.
Where you were involved with Ferrari, Maserati and Lotus.
Yes, yeah.
Which sounds very exciting. And then 11 years ago, you then transitioned to Lotus Silverstone.
Yeah.
And eventually then obviously became Managing Director. So that's a career that's predominantly been focused with cars and some very, very exciting brands. Before we get into talking about what it was like working within those businesses, I'm really interested to understand where your sort of memory is and the genesis behind all things cars, because presumably you're a massive car fan and potentially a performance car fan, I would guess. And so where's that come from?
So, my earliest memories are of cars.
Yes.
I've grown up loving them. As early as when my brother was born, when I was about I was about 3 years old. I can remember going into hospital when he was born and being presented with a model Ferrari.
Nice.
That's my earliest memory, and I've grown up, loved cars. My father loves cars as well, so
okay.
I'm sure it's a family trait.
Okay, so your dad loves cars, and therefore obviously the presumably a matchbox type Ferrari being given to you at 3 years old, and then presumably from there posters on the wall, favourite cars, etc., etc.
Yes, yeah, the posters on the wall as a child. The Lamborghini Countach, the 911 Turbo, and of course the Esprit.
Yes, of course. And so from obviously a career background, before we sort of talk about Lotus Silverstone, which is a big area that I want to focus on, what was it like working and selling Ferraris and Maseratis? Because they're obviously, Lotus is obviously a niche brand and a great brand. Ferrari, Maserati are elite cars, I would say, right?
Yeah.
Where Lotus are clearly aspiring to be and to grow and to become part of, presumably. What was it like working with Maseratis and Ferraris?
Yeah, it's surprisingly, there are similarities. So certainly the heritage for both brands is particularly large.
Yes.
Ferrari has a following of people that know the heritage, as Lotus does.
Yes.
Where Ferrari customers tended to be different was in their status. They were generally a lot more wealthy, with higher expectations of their own abilities.
Okay. Fine. Okay. And then obviously obviously part of your journey with Dick Lovett was also selling Lotuses, and then that naturally progressed to eventually moving to Lotus Silverstone. Phenomenal brand, as you said, amazing heritage, and based in the heart of British motorsport and potentially global motorsport. Yeah. And so what was the reason for moving to Lotus, and what's kept you at Lotus for over a decade?
So Lotus has always had a special place for me, even whilst selling Lotus alongside Ferrari and Maserati. I always enjoyed driving the Lotus product much more.
Why?
It's designed for the driver.
Okay.
Frankly, I think. Not that Ferrari product isn't a great driver's car, but the cars in that era when I was there, it was the F40, F430, and I don't know if you've ever driven one. Very wide car, and on the B roads around Wiltshire, it's particularly dull because the car is too wide to enjoy on the road, which then means you're limited to track experience, and nobody really takes a Ferrari on track because they're too valuable. Whereas you can jump in a Lotus Elise or a Lotus Exige or even the Evora now, and they're a smaller car compared to the current range of Ferrari product. So you can go out and drive on a B road, and you can just enjoy the experience without worrying, is there something coming the other way? Is the car too wide for this corner? And for me, that's been the most engaging aspect of it.
And life within Silverstone. So Lotus have been here for a long time and have seen Silverstone Park develop, with the support of MEPC, who have come in and obviously enhanced and grown the community here. And you guys as a business also then recently moved to new premises just around the corner, so sort of 11,000 square foot, so a much bigger premises. What's that been like, and why did the business decide to do that, and also why did you guys decide to stay here within Silverstone?
Okay, there's lots of questions.
Lots of questions. So why the move? How's it been, and why?
Okay, so the move was triggered by a number of circumstances. Clearly, we had outgrown our old facility. So our old unit 4142, which is just around the corner, that we had 15 cars that had to live outside all year long. And the parking next to it for customers coming in wasn't very great. We had just outgrown that site. Under Silverstone ownership, and I don't know if you'd figured this bit out, but when we first set up Lotus Silverstone back in 2009, it was part of the Silverstone Circuits group. Under them, there was never going to be any further investment in the business. So we acquired the business from them 2 years ago. And at that point, we were then able to invest in the business. And the first thing we did was to give us the space we needed to expand. And that's when we went into Unit 1117.
Which is a great unit because it's right next to you've got some good neighbours. So you're next to Virgin Racing and a few others, and directly opposite Silverstone, the new sort of engineering hub, sports engineering hub, and presumably that's attracted and hopefully going to attract more footfall. Certainly from a sort of an open door policy, people coming into the unit and having a look at the cars. Presumably that's happening, or you're hoping that's going to start happening.
Yeah, we're not like a high street brand. A BMW dealership on a main road expects lots of passing traffic and people naturally walking in. We don't get much of that, but certainly get more now that we've moved than we had on our previous Unit 41.
Good. And what's a typical Lotus driver look like? So we obviously just mentioned briefly sort of Ferraris and Maseratis. We can get a good idea just by common sense about potentially, how they may be. What's a typical Lotus driver like, and what's a typical customer look like?
Well, without wanting to sort of pigeonhole or suggest we don't sell to particular people, the Lotus customers we deal with tend to be anything from mid-20s right up until their 80s.
Great.
And there's no particular thing that runs in common with them.
Apart from a love of Lotus.
Apart from, well, a love of driving.
Ah, yes.
Yeah, and I think that's the web that pulls it all together, is that they're all driving enthusiasts. We do, of course, see people who grew up watching Lotus in Formula One. They're one of the most successful Formula One teams of all time. Great names, Ayrton Senna, Jim Clark. They attracted the right drivers. So for a lot of people, they were a childhood sort of icon. So perhaps the older generation that we deal with maybe are a bit more brand orientated, but the younger generation we see are very much about the driving experience, the performance you get for the money you spend.
Yeah, because it's accessible, right? So it's at a price point where, so it's not cheap, clearly, but it's a price point where, as you said, 20, 30-year-olds, 40-year-olds who are looking for quality driving experience, but one that's affordable,
exactly,
can have it. And do people have, this is me just learning, actually, just thinking on my toes, do people have that as a sort of first car, or would they have it sort of as a second car? Do people use them as day-to-day? Presumably they must do.
Yeah, so something like the Evora, which is a more practical sports car.
Evora's a bit newer, is that right?
It's a bit newer. 2009 that came around.
Yeah.
Certainly most owners of those use them as a primary car.
Okay.
The Elise and the Exige tend to be more secondary cars.
Okay. That's because they're maybe a bit smaller, or
less practical.
Less practical. Okay, presumably so. Less boot space or storage space and stuff like
exactly,
that.
Exactly,
yeah. Okay. And so Lotus Silverstone, so presumably sell new cars,
yes,
sell used cars, and you must deliver sort of servicing as well to customers,
repairs,
upgrades, stuff like that.
Yeah.
Okay, fine. And I've also seen that you guys also work with and obviously have a relationship with Caterham.
Yes, we started that relationship with Caterham this year.
Okay.
And our first year in now, we've had a really good time with them. They're a much different brand. The customers are really quite different to Lotus customers as well.
Okay. How?
Well, they're completely different customers for a start. We did wonder when we took Lotus and added Caterham to it, whether or not we would see the Lotus customers perhaps swapping over to Caterham or vice versa. But what we've seen this year is that the customer who walks through the door looking at Caterham generally isn't looking at Lotus. So it's actually brought a whole new range of people into the showroom that we wouldn't have seen otherwise.
Great.
There have been occasions where they've ended up buying a Lotus instead of a Caterham, and vice versa.
The main thing is they're coming to the site, they're looking at both.
Increased footfall.
Yeah, and they're experiencing it. And so are they, and so I've seen on the website, I mean, we spoke briefly before, so things like track days at Silverstone, I appreciate you just can't sort of rock up and say, look, I want to take a Lotus for a spin or my car for a spin, but presumably customers and clients of both Lotus and Caterham are able to pre-book that with Silverstone or presumably anywhere else, and these are clearly great and fun cars to take out on the track because, as you've said, because of their size and their nimbleness and their speed.
Yeah, and well, the fact that they are so suited to somebody who enjoys driving.
Yeah.
This year we worked with Lotus cars, and we've helped dozens of customers go out on track via a test drive or track test drive setup that the factory have been working on. So we worked with RMA and Silverstone, and we've been able to get people experiencing the V6 products, so the Evora and the Exige on track.
Nice.
And we've sold cars off the back of it, so it's definitely been worth doing.
Method to your madness, yeah, it makes sense. And 2017 was obviously a big year for Lotus. So 2017, for those that aren't aware, a Chinese firm called Geely bought a 51% ownership of Lotus. What's that been like? Has there been any sort of noticeable changes? And this is a presumption. Presumably, there's going to be some sort of phase where there's a focus on enhancing the brand and building the brand, and even potentially looking to compete with the likes of Porsche and maybe not necessarily Ferrari because of different sort of client types, but from a driving experience, Porsche are clearly a good target.
Yes, yeah. Obviously, since Geely took over, we've seen externally very little change. Internally, we know and we've seen a huge investment within the factory at Hethel in the UK, which is where Lotus build their cars. We are also aware that there's a lot of work going on future product, and they have really big ambitions, and we expect to grow sizably to keep up with those ambitions over the next 10 years.
And so do you think that could see, and again this is me just literally thinking on my toes, so do you think that could see, because Lotuses have got a certain sort of, you can envisage and picture what a Lotus looks like from a size perspective, two doors, nimble, some more practical than others, as we've sort of just discussed. Do you think that could see an evolution of the sort of chassis and the size of the car and the number of doors, or do you think they'll sort of try and maintain their original sort of heritage and the pedigree that Lotus were known for?
So, and Lotus being known for certain things depends on your age.
Exactly.
I think our generation perhaps knows the Esprit,
yes.
And maybe the younger generation will know it as the Elise,
yes,
which is this sort of quirky niche sports car. If you think of the generation that watched Formula One religiously when Lotus were at the top of the field, they were innovative and they always had the best technology. They implemented things in Formula One that other teams had to follow. And sometimes, like the Type 88, for example, they got banned because they were too far ahead of the game. And I believe the ambitions are to get back to the forefront of technology. We've seen the launch of the Avaya this year, which is a £2 million electric hypercar.
Nice.
It follows the classic Lotus idea that a car must be beautiful. To look at it, it's fantastic. But it has that ambition of being the most technically advanced car on the market.
Nice.
It's, I think, the only electric hypercar in the UK. I think it's the first one, and they're talking about 2,000 brake horsepower from an electric.
Only 2,000.
Only 2,000, exactly. Yes.
Okay.
And that is a mark in the sand to say we're here, we're back. I think.
Next question: have you sat in that car yet?
I've touched it.
Touched it, yeah, touched it.
I've touched it and licked it.
I haven't. That is commitment. That is passion for the brand. I've literally licked the new electric hypercar. And so talking about, and that's fantastic, and that's really exciting to hear, and clearly looking forward to seeing over the next few years how that evolves, especially if that then sees some of these vehicles at Silverstone.
Yes.
For us.
I can't wait to drive that.
Yeah, as fans and as members of Silverstone Park to go and see. But talking about growth, obviously Geely, as you said, big plans. But obviously Silverstone, Lotus Silverstone, presumably also have sort of plans to focus on growth areas. And so, what are those growth areas? Are you guys involved or part of the enterprise zone? And so, what are the hopes for the future?
Yeah, so we are where we sit. We're in the enterprise zone. I think our role within that is to help the skills, and we are working with various organisations like the Big Bucks Challenge to try and help the younger generation see how they fit into a future world of work.
So what is the Big Bucks Challenge?
So the Big Bucks Challenge is a Buckinghamshire-based challenge where schools are pitted against each other, and they are encouraged to put a sales pitch forward that promotes the company they've been paired with or partnered with. So next year, 2020, we're paired with Buckingham School.
Nice. And
they will be pitching to the rest of the Buckingham schools why Lotus Silverstone is the best company in the area.
Nice.
So obviously they've got the easiest job.
Yeah, of course.
But it's great because the idea is that we're promoting sales skills. Yes. Which schools don't particularly teach sales skills. My you looked at my CV, and my sales skills, my customer skills were grown from the ground, working in retail, into car sales. So interacting with customers, and you learn through making mistakes what works and what doesn't work. We have a shortage, I think this country actually doesn't particularly value sales skills. I think it sees salespeople as often like the bottom of the rung almost.
Yeah, like snack oil salesman. It's and it's the same with mine. I'm in financial services. I'm in financial planning, which is a noble profession. What we do as a business, changes lives, and that's the feedback we have. But I work within financial services, which is rife of people that we just clearly don't trust.
Yes.
And it's I'm sure it's the same with cars, and it's the same with property, and
estate agents, used car salesmen.
There's a connotation when actually in reality it's a highly skilled role. And you're right, I think certainly with the age of social media and mobile phones, the next generation, from a social ability to face-to-face talk to another human, especially another human that might be older than them, this type of big bucks challenge sounds perfect for helping them come out of their shell and give them the confidence that they don't have to be behind a phone. They can actually talk to people. They're going to engage and listen and hopefully buy the product, which in this example would be Lotus through the challenge, which is exciting. And presumably you're going to be working or meeting those students and obviously introducing Lotus and what you guys do. How does that work?
Yes, exactly. So I will go into Buckingham School in January, and we will meet the year group that's working on the project, and the year group will have an challenge in amongst teams there, and the winning team from that school will then go to represent their school in a bigger challenge within the region.
Nice. And so will you so with the winning team, for example, would you then logically invite them across to the site so they can see the cars, sit in the cars?
Yeah, so they will spend some time, so the winning team will spend some time with the dealership, looking around, understanding it, to help them grow their pitch, to move forwards in the regional. Yeah,
well, then to become passionate about it, don't they?
Yes.
And, buy into the brand. So try and give them a couple of nice jumpers like you're wearing right now for the interview, so that they become a marketing piece for you. And I think that's a fantastic idea. And so that's happening in January. And then presumably, when's the sort of final? When's the competition?
The final happens around Easter.
Okay, fine. So pretty soon.
Yes.
And then that'll be good. And then presumably that'll be in the press, and that'll be some good PR for both the school and Big Bucks Challenge, but also Lotus.
Yeah, and it's a great initiative. I wonder why other regions don't do it.
Perhaps focusing on other challenges at the moment for them, but you are right. The next generation and supporting them is absolutely pivotal. What's your favourite Lotus?
So I get asked that almost every day by customers. Which one's your favourite? And
which one is your favourite?
I don't know. It's like a toolbox, isn't it? You might have a hammer and a screwdriver. You don't necessarily favour one over the other. You'd use the hammer if you were pushing a nail in, but you'd use the screwdriver for a screw. I love the Elise for road driving. On a Sunday morning on a B road, it doesn't really get any better. It's not too powerful for the road, so you can enjoy yourself. Roof comes off on a nice summer's day.
What's the brake horsepower of one of those?
220, which is more than enough.
Front wheel, back wheel drive?
Rear wheel drive, mid-engine, and it weighs about 800 kilograms, so power to weight ratio is everything with that car. If I had to do a longer journey though, I'd jump in an Evora. If I have to go to Hethel, it's a 2.5 hour drive. The Evora just makes complete sense. It's still a quick car, but far more comfortable to drive on the road. And of course the Exige is the car for track. Really, you can drive it on the road, plenty of people do, but for me that car's too fast for the road.
Racing car.
Yeah.
And what's it like working at Silverstone Park? So we're doing this interview now at the Innovation Centre, which is where my company Longhurst is based, and you guys are just over the road. What's it like being part of Silverstone and Silverstone Park, and what's keeping Lotus here?
Well, it's interesting how the journey has happened. I've been around the site for 10 years, and the Innovation Centre was still owned by Silverstone Circuits. These meeting rooms have come up since MEPC took over. It's just been interesting to see MEPC come in and the investment they've made within the facilities. It absolutely transformed the place from feeling a little bit underloved and run down. I remember the month it all happened. The guys came in immediately and were clipping the trees and making the place look presentable, and that just hadn't happened previously. So it's been an interesting journey seeing MEPC. As a tenant of theirs, I've got absolutely no complaints. They're very good. They have very high standards. They expect things to be kept clean and tidy, which actually suits us because being a slightly retail environment, we want things to be clean and tidy. So it keeps our neighbours in check, possibly.
Well, it's an exciting place to come, right? So you've got to imagine, certainly for a potential new customer to Lotus, coming to have a look at your location and to have a look at the cars. They're driving into Silverstone under the Silverstone signs, and then they're going past nice buildings, but they're also then seeing the likes of Force India, Virgin Racing, plus a number of other car manufacturers here and race teams, and then clearly also Lotus at the heart of it. It's good, and it encourages more people to come and visit, and I know that Silverstone Park are going to be developing more. They've got planning permission to be building more units. Silverstone obviously building the Hilton Hotel for race days, plus. So hopefully that's just going to drive more and more people, and obviously the Silverstone Experience launched a couple of months ago as well. So hopefully more people are going to be coming here, and hopefully that will drive more people through your doors, which will be exciting. 25 minutes into the interview, Matthew, thank you so much for sharing so much information with us already. I think I'm going to start pulling it down and sort of close the interview off. I think I'm going to ask 3 more questions. One is for me. So I've never sat in a Lotus, and one of the reasons I've never sat in a Lotus is I always have a fear that I'm going to be too tall for it. So I'm 6'3". So for tall drivers, Lotus is good, bad?
Well, no. So the Elise is our smallest car. We have customers as tall as 6'5".
Oh wow, okay.
And they are able to wear a crash helmet as well. But
really,
it's a larger car once you're in it than you think. The real challenge is getting into the Elise. And in fact, actually, Lotus made a big marketing spin of it a few years back and set a viral video campaign of recording yourself. How quickly can you get in?
It's clever.
Yeah.
Clever. Presumably the Evora is a bit bigger.
The Evora is a normal car in that sense. It's no different to get into or out of than any other sports car.
Fine.
Very easy to live with.
Well, I haven't been along to the site yet, so I'm going to come along and have a sit in one. I think I'm not due to change my car for another year or so, but you never know. So we'll have a look at that. Embarrassing mistakes. So we like to share embarrassing mistakes of our wonderful dear guests, and we've had some absolute corkers. Rosbirds have a specific very funny one. We've had somebody fall asleep during a sort of virtual board meeting whilst he was on conference call, and he was snoring down the phone to everyone else listening, part of that board meeting. But from sort of Matt Haskins' perspective, what you got any funny stories, any that involve cars or anything that we can share with our wonderful listeners?
Yeah, well, probably embarrassingly, yes.
Okay, good.
So, we're creatures of habit.
Yes.
And I have a very specific routine. And when I was in the old unit, 41, I used to drive into work in the morning. I would park up. I would put all the security bollards down. I'd go in. I'd put the kettle on. I'd get the keys out for the cars, and I'd put all the keys on the cars, and then take the cars out of the workshop so they were stored in there at night for security. Normal routine, but this one particular morning I'd come into work and I was desperate for the toilet. So I rushed in, went for a wee, then did my normal routine, got the keys, put them on the cars, and then started taking the cars out. Well, the first car I sat in, I reversed it back and hit a bollard.
Oh, no.
And it was a customer's car as well, so it was a particularly embarrassing, awkward conversation. Unfortunately, Steve, the owner, was we saw the funny side of it, and of course we sorted it all out.
Yes.
But so it's sort of slightly embarrassing moment.
That must happen though, not just with your dealership, but dealerships around the country. There must be occasional prangs and stuff, and it's just, as you've said, it's breaking the routine, taking
human errors.
Human errors, thinking about something else. So, well, it could have been worse at least. And at least the customer was, as you said, saw the funny side of it and was a good sport about it. So,
yes,
and
exactly.
presumably he still owns Lotuses and is a big fan still. So.
He still owns a Lotus. Yes, he does. Yeah.
Good. Life lessons. So we've got some wonderful students listening to the show, we know. But actually, I think there's life lessons for all of us, no matter how old. And so what we like to ask everybody is, look, certainly from your perspective, from Arcadia Group through to Land Rover, Audi, Ferrari, Maserati, and now Lotus, clearly a car expert and a master in your field, no doubt about it. But there would have been a time, let's say when you're 18, where you were still learning and still developing. And so if you could take yourself back to a younger version of Matt Haskins,
yes.
What one bit of advice would you give yourself, and why?
Well, I think as an 18-year-old, I was either going to be an architect or a guitar player.
Wow, okay.
And the one bit of advice would be, although you have a vision of what you think you're going to be, keep an open mind. I was a shy 17-year-old, so I certainly would never have been put down as a car salesperson or somebody in the automotive industry. I had a huge passion for cars, and I naturally fell into buying and selling cars because I owned a car and enjoyed them. So I would say keep an open mind. I didn't go to university. I was meant to go and study civil engineering, but I took a year out. My other bit of advice would be don't take a year out because you'll never go.
But look at the journey that you've been on. So since then, it's not like it turned out to be a bad decision. You've worked for some phenomenal brands, and you are now managing director of Lotus Silverstone. So
yeah, it's an unorthodox path, and I think in today's business environment, I think a lack of a degree is possibly more damaging than it was when I was 17. But yeah, I mean, I've got to where I've got through hard work.
I think so. Just on the sort of educational piece, I think you're right. I think certainly it's subject to what degree people have and the career path they want to go into. There's clearly advantages there, but also hard work and perseverance and passion for what you're doing, I think, can also lead to a lot of success. So certainly for those that are maybe younger listening to this, thinking, well, maybe the university and degrees aren't their path, there are lots of other opportunities out there, and certainly from just hard graft and being really, really passionate about what you do, which you clearly are.
Yeah, and I think you talk about hard graft and what is hard graft, but I think flexibility. We see this a lot, that if you've got the mindset that I'll just do it, it doesn't matter if it's in your job description, it needs to be done, I'll do it. And that for me is one of those skills, one of those traits that's helped me progress. I've never been one to say, not going to do that, it's not in my job description, and you'll catch me having a go at anything. And I think that's important, it's that mindset.
Hear. I've nothing else to add to that. Matthew, thank you so much for coming on the show. Managing Director of Lotus Silverstone. I'm 100% going to get myself across to your unit because I want to go and sit at one of these Auras and see if definitely I can fit in it.
Well, the kettle's always on.
And we can maybe do a video timing session. How quickly can I get in and out of these cars? That would be fun. We can
do that for social media.
Reboot the Lotus promotion. But no, thank you very much for coming on the show. I know our listeners will love to listen and find out more, and we will make sure that we put some links to Lotus's website in the show notes, so if people want to obviously have a look at the cars and what you guys are up to, there's a way for them to find you. So Matt, again, thank you for coming on the show.
No, you're welcome. Thank you.
The Inside Silverstone podcast is produced by the team at Longhurst for the benefit of those with a passion for all things tech, engineering and innovation. For more information, please visit longhurst.co.uk/Inside Silverstone, whilst also remembering to give us a 5 out of 5 star rating on iTunes. Please note that neither Chris Broome or Longhurst work for Silverstone Park, Silverstone Circuit or Silverstone Technology Cluster.